"You've never been with a woman like me," said a homeless woman to a virgin billionaire after she saved his life in a dark alley. But what starts as a shocking rescue spirals into something far more dangerous, because this woman isn't just homeless, she's a trained veteran on the run from enemies who should have been dead years ago, and now those same enemies have locked onto him. Suddenly, the richest man in the city must trust the one person everyone else overlooks, the one woman with scars she refuses to talk about, and the only person willing to stand between him and death. But as hidden threats close in, a terrifying truth rises. She didn't save him by chance. She saved him because his enemies are the same as hers. What happens when the only woman who can protect him is the one being hunted too? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The late autumn evening wrapped around Samuel Wilder like a silk scarf as he slipped through the charity gala's back exit. His shoulders relaxed slightly, finally free from the constant attention and forced smiles that came with these events. The metal door clicked shut behind him, muffling the elegant music and chattering voices that had filled the grand ballroom for the past 4 hours. Samuel loosened his bow tie, grateful for the cool air on his neck. These events always left him drained, though he knew they were necessary for his charitable foundation. Still, he preferred working behind the scenes, letting his software innovations and donations speak for themselves rather than playing the role of visible philanthropist. The narrow service alley stretched before him, lined with brick walls and scattered with shadows from the security lights above. His driver Thomas usually waited at the far end, ready for these pre-arranged escapes from the press and social obligations. But tonight, something felt off. The usual sounds of the city seemed muted, creating an unsettling stillness that made the hair on the back of Samuel's neck stand up. He quickened his pace, his dress shoes clicking against the concrete. The familiar outline of his black sedan waited ahead, but the space felt wrong, too quiet, too still. Before he could process why, a dark figure launched from behind a dumpster, moving with frightening speed. The attack came so fast Samuel barely had time to react. A masked man slammed into him with shocking force, driving him backward until his spine cracked against the brick wall. The impact knocked the wind from his lungs. Through the spots dancing in his vision, Samuel saw the attacker's eyes behind a black ski mask. Cold, focused, professional. This was no random mugging. Samuel tried to cry out, but a gloved hand clamped over his mouth. Pure terror flooded his system as he realized how completely helpless he was. His mind raced frantically. Where was Thomas? Where was security? The attacker's other hand drew back, forming a fist that Samuel knew would probably knock him unconscious, or worse. But the blow never came. A blur of motion erupted from the shadows. Someone else had appeared, a figure in ragged clothes who moved with lethal precision. In the space of seconds, Samuel's attacker was wrenched away from him. He slumped against the wall, gasping, as an incredible scene unfolded before his eyes. The newcomer, a woman, he realized with shock, flowed like liquid steel. She trapped the masked man's punching arm and used his own momentum to slam him face first into the wall where Samuel had just been pinned. The attacker tried to twist free, but she had already hooked her leg behind his knee. He went down hard on the concrete. The fight, if you could call it that, was over in moments. The woman had the masked man face down, one arm cranked up behind his back at a painful angle, her knee planted firmly between his shoulder blades. He stopped struggling, clearly recognizing when he was outmatched. Samuel stared, his heart still racing, trying to process what had just happened. His rescuer was dressed in layers of worn clothing, her dark hair pulled back in tight braids. She was black, probably in her late 30s, with the lean, coiled strength of a predator. But it was her eyes that caught him. Sharp, alert, missing nothing as they swept the alley for other threats. Those eyes locked onto him now, and Samuel felt a jolt of electricity run through him. She studied him with an intensity that made him want to shrink back against the wall, even though she had just saved his life. "You okay?" she asked, her voice low and controlled, despite the man still pinned beneath her. Samuel managed a shaky nod. "Yes, thank you, He trailed off, realizing he had no idea what to say to someone who had just prevented his likely murder. The woman's mouth quirked up in a knowing smirk. "You've never been with a woman like me," she said, and Samuel felt heat rush to his face. The words carried layers of meaning he couldn't quite grasp, but something in her tone made his pulse jump for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. In the distance, police sirens began to wail, growing steadily closer. The woman's expression shifted, becoming guarded. In one smooth motion, she rose from the subdued attacker, who remained motionless on the ground. "Wait," Samuel called out as she turned to leave. "Who are you?" She paused, glancing back over her shoulder. "Kim Brooks," she answered simply. Then she was moving, melting into the shadows with the same fluid grace she had shown in the fight. Samuel watched her vanish into the darkness, still trying to catch his breath. The sirens grew louder, red and blue lights beginning to splash across the brick walls. Samuel stayed frozen in place, his mind replaying those intense few moments over and over. The attack, the rescue, those penetrating eyes that had seemed to see right, through him, Kim Brooks. The name echoed in his thoughts as police cars screeched to a halt at the end of the alley, officers spilling out with flashlights and drawn weapons. But Samuel barely registered their questions and concerns. He couldn't stop thinking about his mysterious rescuer, the homeless veteran who had appeared from nowhere like an guardian angel, then vanished just as quickly. Something told him this wouldn't be the last time their paths crossed. The thought sent an unexpected thrill through him, even as he tried to focus on giving his statement to the police. The night air felt different now, charged with possibility. Samuel touched the wall where he had been pinned, his fingers trembling slightly. In the space of a few minutes, his carefully ordered world had been completely upended. First by violence, then by salvation from the most unexpected source. As the police secured the scene and his security team finally arrived, Samuel found himself searching the shadows, hoping for one more glimpse of the woman who had saved his life. But Kim Brooks was already gone, leaving Samuel with nothing but questions, a racing heart, and the lingering memory of that knowing smirk that had made him blush like a schoolboy. Whatever else happened, he knew this night had changed everything, though he had no idea yet just how much. The alley buzzed with activity now, a stark contrast to the eerie silence that had preceded the attack. Police officers moved methodically through the space, marking evidence with numbered placards while camera flashes lit up the brick walls. Samuel sat on the bumper of an ambulance, a shock blanket draped over his shoulders despite his protests that he was fine. Detective Martinez crouched next to her evidence marker, her gloved hand carefully lifting something that caught the light. "Mr. Wilder," she called, her voice tight. "Could you come look at this?" Samuel pushed himself up, his legs still a bit unsteady. As he approached, flanked by two members of his security team, the detective held up a small evidence bag. Inside was a single brass bullet casing. But it was what was etched into the metal that made Samuel's blood run cold, his name, carved in tiny, precise letters. "This wasn't just a random attack," Martinez said quietly. "Someone specifically targeted you." Samuel stared at his name on the bullet casing, feeling suddenly dizzy. If Kim hadn't appeared when she did. He swallowed hard. "I need to go to the hospital," he said abruptly. "Sir, the paramedics already cleared you," one of his security team reminded him. "I don't care. I want to be sure." Samuel's voice came out sharper than he intended, but the sight of that bullet casing had shaken him deeply. What if there's internal bleeding or something they missed? No one argued further. Within minutes, he was in the back of his armored SUV, heading to St. Mary's Hospital. The emergency room was relatively quiet this late on a weekday night. As Samuel sat on the examination table, waiting for the doctor to return with his scan results, his mind kept drifting back to the attack. He could still feel the crushing force of the man's arm across his throat, the rough brick scraping his back through his expensive suit jacket. Then Kim had appeared, moving with a fluid grace that seemed impossible. The way she had taken down his attacker, it was like watching a dance, but one with lethal precision. Her hands had known exactly where to strike, her body automatically finding the perfect leverage points. The memory of her eyes lingered most vividly, dark and intense, missing nothing as they had locked onto his. There had been something in that gaze that went beyond just tactical assessment. It was like she had seen straight through his carefully maintained facade to something deeper. "Well, Mr. Wilder," Dr. Chen said, returning with a tablet in hand. "All your scans are clear. No sign of internal injuries or bleeding. You'll have some bruising on your throat and back, but nothing serious." Samuel nodded, but found himself reluctant to leave the brightly lit safety of the hospital. It was well past midnight now, and the thought of the darkness waiting outside made his skin crawl. His security team had doubled in size, with cars positioned at every exit, but it didn't feel like enough. The ride home was tense. Samuel couldn't stop watching the shadows between streetlights, half expecting masked figures to emerge from every dark corner. His security detail maintained constant radio contact, calling out their positions and status as they moved through the city streets. When they finally pulled up to his mansion's gates, Samuel felt his shoulders tighten rather than relax. The sprawling grounds should have represented safety, but tonight every manicured bush seemed like potential cover for an attacker. The fountain's peaceful burbling sounded ominous in the still night air. Inside, the foyer soared 3 stories high, marble floors gleaming in the soft light from crystal chandeliers. Samuel had always loved this space, its grandeur, its sense of achievement represented in architectural form, but now the vastness felt oppressive. His footsteps echoed too loudly on the polished stone. The shadows in the corners seemed deeper, more menacing. He stood there, briefcase forgotten at his feet, staring up at the elegant curved staircase. Somewhere in the house, a clock ticked steadily. The security system hummed, its little red lights blinking reassuringly from every window and door. 2 members of his security team stood discreetly by the entrance, while others patrolled the grounds outside. All of it, the alarms, the guards, the bulletproof glass, suddenly felt like tissue paper. His name carved into that bullet casing flashed through his mind again. Someone had specifically chosen him as a target. Someone had gotten close enough to attack him despite all his precautions, if not for a homeless veteran, happening to be in exactly the right place. Samuel wrapped his arms around himself, feeling cold despite the perfectly regulated temperature. The mansion's silence pressed in around him, broken only by that steady ticking clock and the soft footsteps of his security team. He had never felt less at home, less safe, in this space that was meant to be his sanctuary. Every shadow held potential threats. Every distant sound made him flinch. For the first time in years, Samuel Wilder felt completely, terrifyingly vulnerable. And standing in his massive foyer, surrounded by all the trappings of wealth and security that money could buy, he had never felt more alone. Samuel jerked awake at 5:30 in the morning, his silk pajamas damp with sweat. He had tossed and turned most of the night, managing only brief snatches of restless sleep filled with masked figures and glinting metal. The bedroom's security system blinked steadily, but it offered little comfort. Knowing further sleep was impossible, he dragged himself through his morning routine. The bruises on his throat had darkened overnight, a stark reminder against his skin in the bathroom mirror. His hands trembled slightly as he knotted his tie. By 7 o'clock, his security team had assembled in the mansion's conference room. The men and women sat rigidly in their chairs, faces grim as their chief, Marcus Bennett, stood at the head of the table beside a digital display. "We've conducted preliminary threat assessments," Marcus began, his voice clipped and professional. "Given the personalized nature of the threat, the bullet with your name, this wasn't random, Mr. Wilder. We're looking at several possible categories of perpetrators." Samuel wrapped his hands around his coffee mug, seeking warmth. "Walk me through them." "First, stalkers." Marcus clicked through to a new slide. "Your public profile makes you a potential target for fixated individuals. We're reviewing all recent correspondence, social media mentions, and security footage for patterns." The next slide showed financial graphs. Competitors are another possibility. The timing of the attack, right after announcing the new renewable energy initiative, could indicate corporate espionage or sabotage. "Former employees?" Samuel asked quietly. "Yes, sir. We're examining personnel records, particularly focusing on contentious departures or those who might blame you for personal setbacks." Marcus paused. "There's also the possibility of extremist groups. Your environmental and social justice initiatives have made some powerful enemies." The meeting continued for 2 hours, each possibility more unsettling than the last. Samuel's security detail would be tripled. His schedule would be completely restructured. No public appearances without extensive advance screening. Around 2 o'clock that afternoon, the detectives returned. Detective Rodriguez and her partner settled into Samuel's home office, their expressions carefully neutral. "We've been analyzing witness statements," Rodriguez began, opening her notebook. "Something interesting came up regarding the homeless veteran who intervened. She gave our officers an unusually detailed breakdown of your attacker's fighting style." Samuel leaned forward. "What do you mean?" She identified specific military combat techniques, described the exact sequence of moves he used, including some fairly obscure special forces maneuvers. Rodriguez's dark eyes narrowed slightly. The kind of knowledge that suggests either extensive training or inside information. "You think she might be connected to this somehow?" Samuel's chest tightened. "We can't rule anything out at this stage. Her intervention was remarkably well-timed, and she disappeared before we could conduct a thorough interview." After the detectives left, Samuel paced his office restlessly. The suggestion that Kim might be involved in the attack didn't sit right with him. He kept remembering the way she had moved, protective, not threatening. The sharp intelligence in her eyes when she had looked at him. Making a sudden decision, he called Marcus. "I need to go back to the scene. Sir, I strongly advise against—" "Not alone," Samuel interrupted. "Full security detail, but I need to see it again." An hour later, Samuel stood in the alley where he had nearly died, surrounded by a discreet but watchful security team. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows between the buildings. Everything looked different in daylight, smaller, less menacing. But the memory of fear still lingered. He walked the length of the alley slowly, trying to piece together the fragments of that chaotic moment. Where had Kim come from? How had she known to be there? His security team watched nervously as he moved towards the street. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Samuel expanded his search to the surrounding blocks. He was about to give up when he spotted a familiar figure sitting on the curb outside a convenience store half a block from the attack site. Kim sat with her back against a light pole, carefully eating what looked like donated food from a paper bag. She wore the same military jacket as the night before, her posture alert even in repose. As though sensing his presence, she looked up. and their eyes met across the distance. Samuel's heart beat faster as he took a step forward. Kim slowly rose to her feet, her expression wary but not hostile. Her gaze flicked to the security team hovering nearby, then back to Samuel's face, waiting to see what he would do. The evening light cast long shadows across the convenience store parking lot as Samuel took another careful step toward Kim. Her posture remained cautious but controlled, like a soldier assessing a situation rather than someone afraid. "I wanted to thank you again," Samuel said softly, keeping his distance. "What you did last night." He shook his head, still processing the memory. I owe you my life." Kim's expression remained neutral, but her eyes tracked everything. The security team's positions, the passing traffic, the exits. "You don't owe me anything." Samuel reached for his wallet. "Please, let me at least—" "No." The word came out sharp and final. Kim straightened her jacket, the military patches faded but still visible. "I don't do hero work for pay." "Then let me help some other way." Samuel pressed. "A place to stay, food, whatever you need." A bitter smile crossed Kim's face. "What makes you think I need your help?" "I just—" Samuel gestured helplessly at her current situation. "Because I'm homeless?" Kim's voice held no anger, just weary resignation. "Trust me, Mr. Wilder. My current living situation is the least complicated thing about me." Samuel studied her face, noting the intelligence behind her tired eyes. "How did you know how to handle him like that? The attacker?" Kim's expression closed off slightly. "You pick things up on the streets. The police said you gave them a detailed breakdown of his combat techniques, special forces level stuff. Maybe I watch a lot of action movies." But there was something in her tone, a deflection that felt practiced. Samuel took another step closer, lowering his voice. The detective mentioned specific military maneuvers, things only someone with training would recognize. Kim's jaw tightened. "Lots of veterans end up on the streets. You know that, right? Is that what happened to you?" Her laugh held no humor. "What happened to me is my business, Mr. Wilder, and trust me, you don't want to make it yours." Before Samuel could respond, rapid footsteps approached from behind. His security team had finally caught up, their faces tight with concern. "Sir!" Marcus called out sharply. "You can't just walk away from—" Kim's entire demeanor changed in an instant. Her muscles tensed, her stance shifting subtly into something more defensive. Her eyes darted between the approaching men, calculating angles and distances with military precision. "It's all right," Samuel said quickly, both to his team and to Kim. "Everything's fine, we're just talking." But Kim was already backing away, her expression closed off again. "I should go." "Wait," Samuel called out, an edge of desperation in his voice. "I haven't been able to sleep since it happened. Every shadow looks like a threat. I keep replaying it in my mind, trying to understand." He swallowed hard. "You seem to know more than you're saying. About what happened. About who might have done this." Kim paused, studying him. For a moment, something like pity softened her features, mixed with clear reluctance. She seemed to be weighing something in her mind, some decision Samuel couldn't guess at. Finally, she simply shook her head. "Get better security, Mr. Wilder, and watch your back." Without another word, she turned and walked away, her stride purposeful and controlled. Samuel watched her disappear into the growing shadows of evening, troubled by the layers of mystery surrounding her. She moved like a soldier, analyzed threats like an operative, and clearly knew more about his attacker than she was willing to share. The question was, why? His security team clustered around him, Marcus already speaking into his radio, but Samuel barely heard them. His eyes remained fixed on the spot where Kim had vanished. wondering what other secrets she was carrying and why she seemed so determined to keep them hidden. The orange-pink sky deepened toward dusk as Samuel finally allowed his team to escort him back to the waiting car. But his mind stayed fixed on Kim's warning to watch his back and the wealth of unspoken knowledge behind those simple words. The grandfather clock in Samuel's study chimed 11 times, each resonant note echoing through the empty halls of his mansion. He stood at his bedroom window, staring out at the manicured lawn bathed in security lighting. 2 guards patrolled the perimeter, their movements precise and professional, but their presence did little to ease his anxiety. Sleep felt impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the attacker's mask, felt the brutal force of those hands. His ribs still ached where he'd been slammed against the wall. The doctors had assured him nothing was broken, but the bruises went deeper than skin. Samuel ran his hands through his disheveled hair and sighed. The house felt like a cage, but at least it was a secure one. Still, the walls seemed to be closing in with each passing hour. "I need some air," he muttered to himself, grabbing a light jacket. The security team wasn't happy about him going outside, even within the gated property. But they adjusted their positions to maintain clear sight lines as Samuel paced near the driveway. The autumn wind rustled through the trees that lined his property, their shadows dancing across the perfectly maintained lawn. He wrapped his arms around himself, trying to find comfort in the familiar surroundings of his home. A slight movement across the street caught his attention. Samuel squinted into the darkness beyond the security lights. For a moment he thought he was imagining things, until a familiar figure stepped out of the shadows. "You should be more careful." Kim's voice carried clearly across the street. "Standing in bright light makes you an easy target." Samuel's heart jumped, both from surprise and relief. "How long have you been out there?" Kim crossed the street with that same fluid grace he remembered, her movements deliberate and controlled. Up close, he could see the exhaustion in her face, but her eyes remained sharp and alert. "Long enough to spot 3 weak points in your security setup," she answered, glancing at the guards who were now moving toward them with hands on their weapons. "Tell your people to stand down. If I meant you harm, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Samuel waved off his security team, though they maintained their positions nearby, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Why are you here?" Kim's expression grew serious. "Because what happened wasn't random, and you need to understand what you're dealing with." A chill that had nothing to do with the wind ran down Samuel's spine. "What do you mean?" "The bullet casing with your name." Kim's voice dropped lower. "That's not just a threat, it's a signature, a very specific one." She glanced around again, her posture tense. "We shouldn't talk out here in the open." "Then come inside," Samuel offered quickly. "Not a good idea." Kim shook her head. "The less I know about your home layout, the better, for both our sakes." Samuel struggled to process her words, the implications sending fresh waves of fear through him. "Who are these people? Why would they target me?" Kim's laugh was hollow. "That's what I've been trying to figure out. I've been watching your property because—" She hesitated, seeming to weigh her next words carefully. "Because the people who once hunted me might now be hunting you." Samuel felt the blood drain from his face. "Hunted you? Who?" "The less you know right now, the safer you are." Kim cut him off. "But I need you to understand something. If you don't take this seriously, there will be more attacks. These people don't give up, and they don't make mistakes." The security lights cast harsh shadows across Kim's face, highlighting old scars Samuel hadn't noticed before. The weight of her words, combined with the physical evidence of her past battles, made his stomach clench. "Stay," he blurted out. "Please, help me understand what I'm up against. Help me protect myself." Kim's expression flickered with something like sympathy, quickly masked. "You don't want me involved in your life, Mr. Wilder." "I think I need you involved." Samuel countered. "You're the only one who seems to know what's really happening. And you've already saved my life once." The wind picked up, sending leaves skittering across the driveway between them. Kim stood absolutely still, her military training evident in every line of her body as she considered his words. "If, and that's a big if, I stayed," she said slowly, "I'd need to maintain my distance. No getting comfortable, no getting familiar. I'd need my own space, separate from the house." "The garage," Samuel suggested quickly. "It's secure, climate-controlled, with its own bathroom, completely private." He gestured to the large structure set apart from the main house. "You could come and go as you need to." Kim studied the building, her tactical assessment obvious in her gaze. "Your security team won't like it." "They don't have to like it. They just have to accept it." For what felt like an eternity, Kim stood silent, her internal debate playing across her face. Finally, she gave a short, sharp nod. "Show me." Samuel felt a rush of relief so strong it made him dizzy. He led her to the garage, keying in the security code with slightly trembling fingers. The lights came on automatically, revealing a spacious 3-car garage with one vehicle present, his rarely used vintage Mustang. "There's a full bathroom through that door," he pointed out. "Heat, air conditioning, plenty of space. I can have a bed delivered tomorrow, proper furniture." "Basic necessities only," Kim interrupted. "A cot will be fine. The less permanent this feels, the better." She walked the perimeter of the space, checking sight lines through the windows, examining the locks on the doors. "I'll need the security codes changed. Only you and I should have access." "Of course," Samuel agreed quickly. "Whatever you need." Kim turned to face him, her expression deadly serious. "One more thing. This arrangement ends the moment I say it does. No questions asked, no arguments, understood?" Samuel nodded, suddenly aware of how much trust he was placing in this stranger and how much she was risking by staying. "Understood." Kim did one more circuit of the garage, then stopped by the side door. "Get some sleep, Mr. Wilder. Tomorrow we start working on keeping you alive." Despite the ominous words, Samuel felt some of his anxiety ease. Having Kim here, with her military precision and obvious experience, made him feel safer than all the security cameras and armed guards combined. He left her to settle in, walking back to the main house with lighter steps. Behind him, he heard the garage door close and lock, and somehow that simple sound was comforting. Whatever storm was coming, he was no longer facing it alone. The first rays of dawn were barely breaking over the horizon when Kim's eyes snapped open. Years of military training had programmed her internal clock perfectly, and even the unfamiliar surroundings of Samuel's garage couldn't disrupt her routine. She rose silently from the simple cot that Samuel had hastily arranged the night before, her muscles slightly stiff, but ready for action. The garage was quiet except for the soft hum of the heating system. Kim pulled on her worn combat boots and jacket, moving with practiced efficiency. She had slept in her clothes, old habits died hard, and she needed to be ready for anything. Outside, the morning air was crisp and cool. Kim began a methodical inspection of the property's perimeter, her eyes scanning for any signs of disturbance or surveillance. The mansion's grounds were extensive, with manicured lawns stretching out to a high security fence. She noted several potential weak points, places where trees grew too close to the fence, spots where the security cameras had slight blind spots. The sun was fully up by the time she completed her circuit. Through the mansion's windows, she could see lights coming on as household staff began their day, but Samuel wasn't yet awake. Kim used the time to plan out the day's training schedule in her head. The man needed serious work. His complete lack of situational awareness was practically an invitation for trouble. Around 8 o'clock, Samuel emerged from the house, looking slightly rumpled and surprised to find Kim already up and active. "Good morning," he called out, his voice still rough with sleep. "Have you been up long?" "Since dawn," Kim replied shortly. "Your property has security gaps that need addressing." Samuel ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Would you like some breakfast? We can discuss it over food." Kim hesitated, then nodded. She followed him into the massive kitchen, where a housekeeper was already preparing something that smelled delicious. The woman gave Kim a curious look but said nothing. Over plates of eggs and toast, Samuel began to open up. "I know I must seem pathetic to someone like you," he said quietly. "I've spent most of my life hiding behind these walls, managing my company remotely, avoiding public appearances whenever possible." "Why?" Kim asked, more curious than judgmental. Samuel pushed his eggs around his plate. "Fear, mostly. My parents died when I was young, and the fortune they left me felt more like a target on my back than a blessing. I've never really dated, never let anyone get close. It seemed safer that way." Kim studied him, noting the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes darted to the windows periodically. She recognized the hypervigilance of someone living with constant fear, even if he didn't have the training to channel it properly. "That ends today," she said firmly, pushing back from the table. "Time for your first lesson in self-defense." They moved to the mansion's home gym, a well-equipped space that looked barely used. Kim showed Samuel basic stance and movement techniques, correcting his position repeatedly. "You're too focused on your feet," she criticized. "Your awareness needs to extend beyond your body. What's behind you right now?" Samuel blinked. I don't know." "Exactly, that's how you get killed. Again, and this time, scan the room before you move." They worked for several hours, Samuel growing increasingly frustrated with his own awkwardness, but refusing to quit. Kim noticed his determination with approval, even as she pushed him harder. After lunch, Kim insisted on a complete tour of the house's security system. The control room was impressive, with multiple monitors showing feeds from cameras throughout the property. But as she suspected, there were gaps in coverage. "There." She pointed to a screen showing the garden area. "That's a blind spot. Someone could easily use those hedges for cover and approach the house undetected." Samuel leaned closer to the monitor, frowning. "I'll have it fixed immediately." "Good, but hardware is only part of the solution. You need to be more aware, more prepared." Kim led him back to the gym as the afternoon light began to fade. "Put these on," she instructed, handing him a pair of practice gloves. Samuel fumbled with the straps, and Kim stepped forward to help him. Her fingers were quick and sure as she adjusted the fit, and she noticed Samuel's slight intake of breath at her proximity. "These will protect your hands while we work on striking techniques," she explained, stepping back to maintain professional distance. "By the time I'm done with you, you'll be stronger and more alert than you've ever been. But you have to trust me, and you have to be willing to work harder than you've ever worked before." Samuel nodded, his expression serious. "I trust you, Kim, and I'm ready to learn." As dusk settled outside the windows, Kim tightened the final strap on Samuel's gloves. "Then let's begin." The morning sun barely crested the horizon when Kim started Samuel's training session. Dew still clung to the grass as she demonstrated a series of defensive moves, her movements precise and fluid. Samuel, dressed in workout clothes that still had price tags on them, watched with nervous attention. "Copy my stance," Kim instructed, positioning her feet shoulder-width apart. "Weight balanced, knees slightly bent." Samuel tried to mirror her position, but his posture was stiff and awkward. Kim shook her head and moved to correct him, her hands firm but careful as she adjusted his shoulders. "Relax," she said. "You're too tense. An attacker can use that tension against you." "Easy for you to say," Samuel muttered, but he tried to loosen his muscles. They spent the next 2 hours working through basic defensive techniques. Kim noticed that despite his initial clumsiness, Samuel was a determined student. He repeated each movement until his form improved, even when his face grew red with exertion and frustration. "Better," Kim acknowledged after he successfully blocked a slow-motion strike. "Now do it 50 more times." Samuel groaned but complied. Sweat darkened his expensive t-shirt as he worked through the repetitions. "Is this how you learned?" he asked between breaths. "My training was different," Kim replied shortly, unwilling to elaborate on her military background. "Again, this time keep your eyes up." By mid-morning, Samuel had progressed enough that Kim allowed them to break for water. As they sat on the mansion's back steps, Samuel checked his phone and grimaced. "I have a board meeting at 2 o'clock, he said. "I can't reschedule it again." Kim's expression hardened. "Then I'm coming with you." "The board won't like that." "The board's feelings aren't my concern. Your safety is." Samuel knew better than to argue. At 1:30 they left for the corporate headquarters in downtown, Kim wearing a borrowed blazer over her tactical gear to look more professional. The security team at the building eyed her suspiciously as she insisted on checking the conference room before letting Samuel enter. The other board members were already seated when Samuel walked in, Kim positioning herself quietly by the door. The executives exchanged meaningful glances, clearly uncomfortable with her presence. "Mr. Wilder," one of them began, "is this level of security really necessary for a routine meeting?" "Given recent events, yes," Samuel replied firmly, though Kim could see the slight tremor in his hands as he opened his laptop. The meeting proceeded with discussions about quarterly projections and market strategies. Kim remained alert, scanning the room periodically while appearing to fade into the background. When the lights dimmed for a presentation, her attention shifted to the large screen at the front of the room. Something about the digital display caught her eye, a subtle flicker that shouldn't be there. Years of training had taught her to trust her instincts about anomalies. As Samuel stood to begin his portion of the presentation, Kim moved swiftly to his side. "Don't connect your laptop," she whispered urgently. Samuel froze, one hand hovering over the connection cable. "What's wrong?" "The system's compromised. Look at the screen refresh rate." Now that she pointed it out, Samuel could see the irregular pattern. He straightened up, addressing the room. "I apologize, but we'll need to postpone the digital presentation. I believe we may have a security issue with the system." The IT department later confirmed that malware had been planted in the conference room's network, designed to steal data from any connected devices. The board members who had earlier questioned Kim's presence now looked at her with newfound respect. As the meeting wrapped up, Mrs. Hattie Greer, the eldest board member and a formidable presence in her own right, approached Kim in the hallway. "Walk with me a moment, dear," she said, her voice warm but commanding. Kim hesitated, glancing at Samuel, who nodded that he would wait. Mrs. Greer led Kim to her private office, a sophisticated space filled with civil rights law books and framed photographs of her with various world leaders. "That was impressive work in there," Mrs. Greer said, settling into a leather chair. "Not many would have caught that breach before it happened." "Just doing my job, Ma'am?" "No." Mrs. Greer smiled knowingly. "You're doing much more than that. I've known Samuel since he was a boy hiding behind his father's legs at board meetings. He's different with you around. Stronger." Kim shifted uncomfortably under the older woman's perceptive gaze. "Whatever brought you to his door," Mrs. Greer continued, "I'm glad you're here. That young man needs someone willing to push him out of his comfort zone. She reached out and patted Kim's hand. And perhaps you need someone worth protecting. The words hit closer to home than Kim wanted to admit. She managed a nod before excusing herself to rejoin Samuel. The drive back to the mansion was quiet, both of them processing the day's events. Instead of going inside, Samuel suggested they order takeout. An hour later, they sat in the garage that had become Kim's temporary home, surrounded by Chinese food containers. "Thank you," Samuel said suddenly, pausing with chopsticks halfway to his mouth. "For today. For all of it." Kim looked up from her Kung Pao chicken. "You did well with the training this morning. I felt like a clumsy idiot." "You were," Kim said bluntly, but there was a hint of amusement in her voice. "But you kept going. That counts for something." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the garage's overhead light casting long shadows. Kim noticed that Samuel seemed more relaxed than she'd seen him yet, his shoulders looser, his movements less guarded. "Mrs. Greer likes you," he commented, reaching for another egg roll. "She's observant." "She usually is." Samuel smiled tiredly. "Kind of like you." Kim didn't respond, but she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the spicy food. The garage might have been sparse and utilitarian, but as they sat there sharing dinner after a long day, it felt oddly like home. The morning sun cast long shadows across the mansion's back lawn as Kim led Samuel through another set of defensive moves. The grass was still damp with dew, and birds chirped in the surrounding trees, creating a peaceful backdrop for their intense training session. "Keep your guard up," Kim instructed, demonstrating the proper stance. "Your left side is always open." Samuel adjusted his position, his t-shirt already showing signs of exertion. Though still awkward, his movements had become more fluid over the past few days. "Like this." "Better." Kim circled him slowly, watching his form. "Now hold it while I check your balance." Without warning, she swept his legs, but this time Samuel managed to catch himself before falling. A small victory, but his proud grin made Kim's usually stern expression soften slightly. "You're learning," she acknowledged. After training, they headed inside for breakfast. It had become their unspoken routine. Kim would cook eggs and bacon while Samuel made coffee and toast. The kitchen staff had been given time off at Kim's insistence. Fewer people meant fewer security variables to monitor. As they sat at the kitchen island, Samuel's security team sent over their morning briefing. Kim studied the reports on Samuel's tablet while he answered urgent emails. "Nothing new," she muttered, scrolling through the surveillance data. "But that doesn't mean we can relax." Samuel looked up from his phone. "You think they're waiting for something specific?" Kim set down her fork, her face growing serious. "I need to tell you something." She took a deep breath, and Samuel could see her wrestling with whether to continue. "The attack, it wasn't random. The way that person moved, the tactics they used. I've seen them before." Samuel put down his coffee cup, giving her his full attention. "Where?" "In Afghanistan. I wasn't just any soldier." Kim's eyes grew distant. "I served in a specialized combat unit. High-risk operations, things that never made the news. The team was... they were like family." "What happened to them?" "There was a mission that went wrong. Really wrong." Kim's voice grew tight. "We lost contact with one, of our own, Marcus. The official report said he died in an explosion, but..." She shook her head. "The way your attacker moved, it was exactly like Marcus's signature style. Everyone had their own way of fighting, and his was unique." Samuel leaned forward. "But if he died..." "That's just it," Kim said. "There was never a body, and now, seeing those same moves here..." She met Samuel's eyes. I think he survived, and for some reason he's targeting you." The weight of this revelation hung heavy in the kitchen. Samuel processed the information while Kim returned to her breakfast, though neither seemed very hungry anymore. Throughout the day, they worked together, reviewing security footage and reports, with Kim pointing out subtle details that only someone with her background would notice. As evening approached, Samuel found himself not wanting to return to his usual solitary dinner routine. "Would you—" He hesitated, then pushed forward. "Would you like to have dinner in the dining room tonight? With me?" Kim looked surprised by the invitation. Her eyes darted to the formal dining room, visible through the doorway, with its crystal chandelier and long mahogany table that could seat 20. "I usually eat in the garage," she said carefully. "I know, but maybe we could both use some normal company for a change." Kim studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Let me change first." When she returned, she had swapped her tactical gear for simple black pants and a clean white shirt. Samuel had ordered dinner from his favorite Italian restaurant, and the aroma of fresh pasta filled the room. Kim hesitated at the threshold, taking in the formal setting. The table had been set for two at one end, making the space feel more intimate despite its grandeur. "It's just dinner," Samuel said softly, pulling out a chair for her. She sat down, her posture still alert but less rigid than usual. Samuel took his seat across from her, and for a while they ate in comfortable silence, the clink of silverware echoing in the large room. "I've never really used this room much," Samuel admitted, looking around at the elegant space. "It always felt too big for one person." "You never have people over?" "Board members sometimes, business associates, but friends?" He shook his head. "I grew up isolated. Private tutors, security details, always being the wilder heir. It's hard to know who really wants to know you and who just wants something from you." Kim nodded, understanding more than he might have expected. "Isolation comes in many forms." "What about you?" Samuel asked. "Before. Everything. Did you have family?" "Foster care," Kim said simply. "The military became my real family, until it wasn't anymore." The conversation flowed more easily after that, touching on memories both light and dark. Kim spoke about the camaraderie she'd found in her unit, while Samuel shared stories about learning to navigate the business world as a young man thrust into responsibility too soon. As they finished their meal, Samuel noticed Kim seemed more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. Her usual vigilant expression had softened, and she even smiled a few times, brief but genuine expressions that transformed her entire face. "We should clean up," Kim said finally, standing and gathering plates. "You don't have to. The staff can—" "I know." She cut him off, already heading toward the kitchen. "But I want to." Samuel followed her lead, carrying the remaining dishes. They fell into an easy rhythm, Kim washing while Samuel dried and put things away. It was such a simple, domestic moment, but Samuel felt an unexpected peace in it. Here was someone who knew exactly who he was, knew the danger he was in, and still chose to share a quiet moment of normalcy with him. As Kim handed him the last plate, their fingers brushed briefly. Neither of them acknowledged it, but something shifted in the air between them, a small crack in the professional distance they'd maintained until now. They finished the cleanup in comfortable silence, the kitchen warm and bright against the gathering darkness outside. Morning sunlight filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the garden path as Samuel and Kim walked side by side. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the sweet scent of blooming flowers. For the first time in days, Samuel felt his shoulders relax slightly. "Your firewall configuration is decent," Kim said, her eyes scanning the perimeter even during their casual stroll. "But there are ways to make it stronger. Military-grade stuff that most civilians don't know about. Samuel nodded, watching a butterfly land on a nearby rose bush. I've spent fortunes on cybersecurity, but it sounds like you know things my tech team hasn't considered. When you're in the field, you learn to spot weaknesses others miss. Kim paused near a stone bench, her expression thoughtful. It's not just about having the best equipment, it's about understanding how the enemy thinks. They continued walking, Kim pointing out various spots where security cameras could be better positioned. Samuel found himself paying more attention to her than to the actual suggestions. The morning light softened her usually stern features, and he noticed a small scar near her temple he hadn't seen before. "What about that appointment today?" Kim asked suddenly, catching him off guard. Samuel's stomach tightened. "The therapy session? I was thinking of cancelling, actually." "Why?" "It just feels—" He struggled to find the words. "With everything going on, sitting in an office talking about my feelings seems important." Kim finished firmly. "Especially with everything going on." Samuel looked at her in surprise. "I wouldn't have expected you to be pro-therapy. The strongest soldiers I knew were the ones who got help when they needed it." Kim's voice was gentle but firm. "There's no shame in taking care of yourself." Later that afternoon, Samuel found himself sitting in his car outside the therapist's office, Kim in the passenger seat. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. "You don't have to wait," he said. "It's an hour-long session." "I'll be right here in the lobby," Kim replied simply, already opening her door. The gesture touched something deep inside Samuel. He couldn't remember the last time someone had waited for him like this, not because they were paid to, but because they wanted to. The session itself passed in a blur of difficult conversations about fear, isolation, and trust. When Samuel emerged, he found Kim exactly where she'd promised, leafing through a magazine, but clearly alert to every movement in the lobby. The drive home was quiet, both lost in their own thoughts as the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. When they arrived at the mansion, Samuel felt a sudden urge to share something he'd never told anyone. In the kitchen, as Kim filled 2 glasses with water, Samuel gathered his courage. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Kim set down the glasses and turned to face him, giving him a full attention. "I've never—" Samuel felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I've never been in a real relationship, never even been kissed." The words tumbled out quickly. "I know it's pathetic for someone my age, but between the business and the security concerns and never knowing who to trust." He trailed off, unable to meet her eyes. For a long moment, Kim was silent. Then he felt her warm hand slip into his, her calloused palm rough against his softer skin. "Samuel?" she said softly, waiting until he looked at her. "There's nothing pathetic about protecting your heart, nothing shameful about waiting for someone you can trust." Her words washed over him like a balm, easing years of secret embarrassment. The kitchen lights cast a warm glow around them, making the space feel like a sanctuary. "You're safe with me," Kim added quietly, giving his hand a gentle squeeze. Samuel felt the truth of those words in his bones. Despite the danger lurking outside, despite all his fears and insecurities, in this moment, standing in his bright kitchen with Kim's hand in his, he felt truly safe for the first time in years. The early morning air held a sharp chill as Samuel poured fresh coffee into his favorite blue mug. Through the kitchen window, he could see the sky beginning to lighten, turning from inky black to a deep purple. He had grown used to Kim's morning routine. She always did a perimeter check at dawn, rain or shine. Samuel smiled as he prepared a second cup of coffee, adding just a splash of cream the way Kim liked it. These quiet morning moments had become precious to him over the past few days. But as minutes ticked by with no sign of her return, an uneasy feeling settled in his stomach. "Kim," he called out, stepping onto the back patio. His voice echoed across the empty garden. No response. Samuel set both coffee cups down on the patio table and walked further into the yard. The grass was wet with dew beneath his feet. "Kim," he called again, louder this time. That's when he saw it. Kim's tactical flashlight lying in the grass near the property's edge. His heart began to race as he approached. Kim would never carelessly drop her equipment. She was too disciplined, too careful. As he got closer, the signs of struggle became obvious. The grass was torn up in places, showing where multiple people had scuffled. Boot prints, different sizes and patterns, marked the soft earth. A few drops of blood stained a nearby rock. "Oh, God," Samuel whispered, his hands shaking as he picked up the flashlight. "Kim!" He spun around, desperately searching for more clues. Near the fence, he found more evidence of her fierce resistance. A broken tree branch, scattered leaves, even what looked like strands of someone else's hair caught in the bushes. Kim had fought hard, just as she'd taught him to do. His phone buzzed in his pocket, making him jump. Unknown number. With trembling fingers, he opened the incoming video message. The image was dark at first, then focused on Kim. She sat tied to a metal chair, her face already showing signs of bruising. But her eyes, those fierce, determined eyes, stared directly into the camera with barely contained rage. A distorted voice spoke. "Mr. Wilder, by now you understand we mean business. The software deal with Global Tech must be terminated within 24 hours, or your guard dog dies slowly." The camera zoomed in on Kim's face. "Such a waste of military training, protecting a soft target like you." The video ended abruptly. Samuel's knees gave out and he sank to the wet grass, clutching the phone. For a moment he couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Kim had been taken because of him, because she tried to protect him. "No," he said aloud, forcing himself to focus. Kim's voice echoed in his memory. "Fear is natural. Use it. Let it sharpen your senses instead of clouding them." With shaking legs, Samuel stood. He called the police first, quickly explaining the situation. But when they advised him to stay put and wait for their arrival, he knew he couldn't. Every minute counted. Running back inside, Samuel grabbed a backpack from his home gym. Kim had taught him to always have emergency supplies ready. He filled it with water bottles, energy bars, a first aid kit, and a spare phone battery. In his bedroom, he changed into dark clothes and sturdy boots, another lesson from Kim about practical clothing choices. Back in the yard, Samuel forced himself to slow down and really look at the scene, just as Kim had trained him. "Details matter," she always said. "The smallest things can tell the biggest stories." That's when he noticed it. Subtle marks in the grass, leading away from the main struggle site. Kim had dragged her feet deliberately, leaving a trail. And there, caught on a fence, post, a small piece of her jacket sleeve. She was leaving him breadcrumbs. Samuel's hand steadied as he pulled out his phone and opened the mapping application. The trail led towards the industrial district on the city's outskirts. He could almost hear Kim's voice. "If you're ever taken, try to mark the route. Pay attention to turns, sounds, anything distinct." The sky was growing lighter as Samuel climbed into his car. His heart pounded against his ribs, but his mind was surprisingly clear. Kim had been preparing him for this, whether he realized it or not. All those lessons about awareness, about reading environments, about trusting his instincts, they hadn't just been about self-defense. "I'm coming, Kim," he whispered, starting the engine. "Hold on." He pulled out of the driveway just as police sirens wailed in the distance. But Samuel didn't slow down. He followed the road east toward the industrial district, his eyes scanning for any sign of Kim's trail. The morning traffic was light, letting him focus entirely on the search. His phone buzzed again. The police, probably telling him to wait for them. Samuel ignored it. Kim had risked everything to protect him. Now it was his turn to fight for her. The rising sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold as Samuel drove into the shadows of abandoned warehouses. Somewhere ahead, Kim was waiting. And this time, he wouldn't let her face the danger alone. The industrial district stretched before Samuel like a maze of corroded metal and broken dreams. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, following the subtle clues Kim had left behind. Each turn brought new challenges, unmarked intersections, crumbling roads, and abandoned lots that all looked eerily similar in the fading daylight. "Think," he whispered to himself, remembering Kim's lessons. "Look for patterns. Trust your instincts." The late afternoon sun cast long shadows between the warehouses, making it harder to spot details. Samuel drove slowly, his eyes catching on every piece of debris, every unusual mark. A scraped fence here, a deliberately overturned trash can there. Kim was leaving signs, but keeping them subtle enough that only someone who knew what to look for would notice. After 3 hours of careful navigation, Samuel's attention was drawn to something glinting in the dying sunlight. He pulled over, his heart racing as he approached the chain-link fence. There, hanging deliberately at eye level, was a set of military dog tags. He carefully lifted them, running his thumb over the embossed metal that read, "Brooks Kim." "You knew I'd find these," he murmured, slipping the tags into his pocket. The warehouse beyond the fence loomed dark and imposing, its broken windows like hollow eyes staring down at him. Samuel circled the building carefully, just as Kim had taught him. "Always know your exits." Her voice echoed in his mind. "Never enter a space without knowing how to leave it." He spotted several doors, most chained, shut, but one side entrance looked recently used. Above it, a security camera slowly panned back and forth. Drawing on his tech expertise, Samuel pulled out his phone and opened a signal disruption app he'd developed. With trembling fingers, he calibrated it to the camera's likely frequency. After a tense moment, the camera's red light blinked out. He had 10 minutes before the system would likely reset. The side door's lock was simple, almost too simple. Samuel's suspicion rose as he eased it open, remembering Kim's warnings about obvious entries often being traps. But he had no choice. He slipped inside, letting his eyes adjust to the dim interior. The hallway stretched before him, lit only by weak sunlight filtering through dirty windows. Somewhere ahead, voices echoed off metal walls. Samuel pressed himself against the wall, controlling his breathing like Kim had shown him. "Panic makes you loud," she'd said during training. "Calm makes you invisible." He counted 2 distinct voices, maybe more. They seemed to be arguing about something, their words too muffled to make out. As Samuel crept forward, his foot knocked against some loose metal debris. He froze, but then an idea formed. Carefully he gathered several pieces of scrap metal. Kim had taught him about diversions. The human ear naturally turns toward unexpected sounds. Moving as quietly as possible, he crept to a junction in the hallway. The voices were clearer now, coming from around the corner. Samuel took a deep breath and tossed several metal pieces down a side corridor, timing them to clatter at different moments. The voices stopped. Footsteps approached. "Check it out," a gruff voice ordered, "and be quick about it." 2 sets of boots moved away from their post. Samuel waited until they were far enough away, then slipped past the junction. His heart thundered in his chest, so loud he feared it would give him away. Fear is energy, Kim had told him. Direct it, use it. The hallway opened into a larger space. Ahead, a single light flickered erratically, illuminating a scene that made Samuel's blood run cold. Kim sat tied to a metal chair, her face bruised, but her posture still somehow defiant. Her tactical shirt was torn and dirty, but she held herself like a soldier, even in captivity. As if sensing his presence, Kim's eyes lifted to meet his. In that moment, something passed between them. Recognition, warning, and something deeper that Samuel couldn't name. Her expression remained neutral, giving nothing away to any watching eyes, but he could read the message in her gaze. Be careful. Be smart. The flickering light cast strange shadows across her face, making her injuries look worse one moment and better the next. But her eyes never wavered from his, steady and alert despite whatever she'd endured. Samuel felt a surge of determination replace his fear. He'd found her. Now he just had to figure out how to get them both out alive. The voices of the guards echoed, from the hallway behind him, growing closer. They would return any moment. Samuel pressed himself into the shadows, his mind racing through everything Kim had taught him about survival, about fighting, about staying alive when everything seemed impossible. The fluorescent light continued its unsteady rhythm, casting Kim in alternating brightness and shadow. In those flickers, Samuel saw not just his protector tied to a chair, but the woman who had become so much more, his teacher, his friend, and maybe something else he hadn't yet found the courage to name. The footsteps grew closer. Samuel tensed, knowing the next few moments would determine whether all of Kim's lessons would be enough to save them both. Kim's eyes widened in dismay when she saw Samuel standing there in the shadows. Her split lip quivered as she whispered hoarsely, "You shouldn't be here. These aren't street thugs. They're trained killers. They're armed to the teeth." Samuel's hands shook as he crept toward her, but his voice remained steady. "I'm not leaving without you. Not after everything you've done for me." He pulled a multi-tool from his jacket pocket, the metal catching the unstable light. "Samuel, please!" Kim pleaded, her military training evident even through her obvious pain. "They'll kill you without hesitation. Get out while you can." "No." The word came out firm as he began sawing at the thick zip ties binding her wrists. "You taught me to face my fears, to fight back. I won't abandon you." Kim's face softened for just a moment before her expression snapped back to alert. "Behind you!" she hissed. Heavy footsteps approached from the hallway. Samuel's heart raced, but his muscles remembered Kim's training. As the guard rounded the corner, Samuel dropped low, just as she had shown him countless times in practice. He swept his leg in a wide arc, catching the guard's ankles. The man went down hard, his head cracking against the concrete floor. "Good form," Kim whispered, a hint of pride breaking through her worry. "But hurry, he won't stay down long." Samuel returned to cutting her restraints, his hands steadier now. The zip ties finally snapped, and Kim immediately began working feeling back into her hands. She winced as she moved, revealing dark bruises along her arms. "Are you okay to move?" Samuel asked, helping her stand. "I have to be," she replied grimly, using the chair for support as she found her balance. "They took my weapons, but not my training. Stay close to me." A harsh alarm suddenly blared through the building, its wailing echoing off the metal walls. Kim grabbed Samuel's arm, her tactical mind already mapping their escape. "They'll have men at all the main exits. We need to find another way." Samuel nodded, following her lead as she moved them away from the unconscious guard. "I came in through a side door, but they'll be watching it now," Kim finished, scanning their surroundings. Her eyes locked onto a narrow corridor, branching off from the main space. "There. Maintenance hallway? Industrial buildings this size always have service passages. Harder to navigate, but better cover. They moved as quickly as Kim's injuries would allow, her breathing controlled but labored. Samuel stayed close, supporting her when needed while watching their backs as she had taught him. The sound of multiple boots pounding on concrete grew louder, coming from several directions at once. The maintenance hallway was tight and dark, barely wide enough for them to move side by side. Pipes ran along the walls and ceiling, creating shadows that made every step uncertain. Behind them, voices shouted commands, growing closer. "Keep moving," Kim whispered, guiding Samuel deeper into the maze-like passage. "Remember what I taught you about footwork. Quiet and deliberate." The booted footsteps grew louder, accompanied by the harsh beams of tactical flashlights sweeping the corridors behind them. Kim pressed Samuel against the wall as light briefly illuminated the passage they had just left, then urged him forward once the beam passed. They continued deeper into the maintenance corridor, the alarm still wailing overhead as the sound of their pursuers echoed through the metal walls around them. Kim's breathing was ragged, but determined as she led them forward, one hand pressed against her ribs, the other gripping Samuel's arm to guide him through the darkness. The maintenance corridor twisted like a maze through the warehouse's depths. Kim leaned heavily against Samuel, her breath coming in controlled bursts as she fought through her injuries. Despite her obvious pain, her mind stayed sharp, analyzing each junction they encountered. "Left here," she whispered, gesturing toward a narrower passage. "The layout's typical for these buildings. Service routes usually parallel the main corridors." Samuel supported her weight, one arm wrapped carefully around her waist, while his other hand traced the wall for balance. The darkness pressed in around them, broken only by distant emergency lights that cast everything in deep shadows. "You're hurt worse than you're letting on," he murmured, feeling her flinch with each step. "Bruised ribs, maybe cracked. Nothing I haven't handled before." Kim's voice was tight but determined. "Stop. Listen." They froze as footsteps echoed ahead, at least 2 sets, moving with military precision. Kim pushed Samuel against the wall, pressing a finger to her lips. The footsteps grew closer, accompanied by the sweep of flashlight beams. "Clear this section," a gruff voice commanded. "They have to be in these service corridors." Kim's eyes narrowed as she assessed their options. Even injured, her tactical mind never stopped working. She squeezed Samuel's arm twice, their signal for "follow my lead," and eased forward in a crouch. As the first mercenary rounded the corner, Kim exploded into action. She drove her shoulder into his midsection, using his own momentum to slam him against the wall. The flashlight clattered to the floor, sending wild shadows dancing across the walls. The second mercenary raised his weapon, but Samuel was already moving. A broken pipe lay nearby, forgotten in the maze of maintenance tunnels. Samuel snatched it up, remembering Kim's lessons about using whatever weapons were available. As the second mercenary tried to aim around his partner, Samuel swung the pipe in a wide arc, catching the man's arms and forcing the weapon aside. Kim had her opponent in a chokehold, her military training evident in every precise movement. "Samuel, down!" she barked. He dropped just as the second mercenary tried to grab him, causing the man to stumble forward. Kim drove her knee into her opponent's stomach and shoved him into his partner, sending both men sprawling. She quickly snatched up one of their fallen weapons. "This way," she gasped, the exertion clearly taking its toll. She gestured toward a heavy door marked Storage B7. They slipped inside the storage room, which was filled with dusty shelves and abandoned equipment. Samuel immediately began dragging heavy boxes against the door while Kim covered the entrance with her newly acquired weapon. "That won't hold them long," she said, sliding down the wall to catch her breath. "We need a plan." Samuel pulled out his phone, its screen casting a pale blue glow across his determined face. Maybe we can even the odds a bit. His fingers flew across the screen as he accessed files he'd downloaded earlier. These old industrial buildings usually run on standardized systems. If I can find the right maintenance access code. Kim watched him work, impressed despite their dire situation. You did your homework. I had a good teacher, he replied, not looking up from his phone. You always said to study the battlefield before engaging. A small smile crossed his face. Got it. Maintenance override from 2015. Killing main power in 3, 2, 1. The warehouse plunged into total darkness. Emergency lights flickered to life moments later, but they provided only minimal illumination, creating more shadows than light. Smart thinking. Kim approved, using the wall to push herself up. The darkness helps us more than them, but Samuel... Her voice grew serious. Their leader, the one I thought was dead, he won't give up easily. He's been planning this for years. Samuel helped steady her as they moved toward the door. Then we'll face him together. You've taught me enough to survive. They eased the storage room door open, checking both directions before slipping back into the corridor. The emergency lights cast everything in an eerie red glow, transforming familiar shapes into menacing shadows. Kim moved more confidently now, using the darkness to their advantage just as she'd been trained. Stay close, she whispered as they navigated through the shadowy passages. The exit's not far, but this is when we need to be. Most alert! The emergency lights will lead us out, but they'll also give away our position if we're not careful. They pressed forward through the darkness, every step measured, every breath controlled. The red emergency lights flickered overhead, creating a strobe-like effect that made the shadows seem to move. Kim's military instincts guided them through the maze, while Samuel watched their backs, both of them working in sync as they made their way toward freedom. The echoing drip of water from the sprinklers mingled with their careful footsteps as Kim and Samuel made their way towards the exit. Red emergency lights cast an otherworldly glow through the corridors, making every shadow look like a potential threat. Kim's breathing had grown labored, her injuries clearly taking their toll, but her eyes remained sharp and alert. They were just 20 feet from the exit when a powerful beam of light hit them directly, momentarily blinding them both. A tall figure stepped out of the shadows, holding both a tactical flashlight and a pistol with practiced ease. Private First Class Kimberly Brooks. A cold voice cut through the darkness. Still running after all these years. Kim went rigid beside Samuel, her face draining of color. Commander Marshall, they told me you died in that ambush. The beam of light shifted slightly, revealing a man with a scarred face and cold, calculating eyes. His military bearing was evident in every controlled movement. Death is a useful cover story when you need to disappear, Marshall replied, his tone conversational but laced with menace. You've led me on quite a chase, Brooks. 7 years of tracking you down, watching you try to fade into invisibility on those filthy streets. Samuel felt Kim trembling beside him, but her voice remained steady. The mission was compromised. You gave illegal orders. I couldn't. You abandoned your unit. Marshall's composure cracked slightly. Everything I built, everything I planned, you nearly destroyed it all with your misplaced conscience. Samuel's mind raced, remembering the security system layouts he'd studied. His phone was still connected to the building's maintenance systems. If he could just... And now you're protecting this soft, privileged businessman. Marshall continued, gesturing with his weapon. How far you've fallen, Brooks. Before Kim could respond, Samuel stepped forward, placing himself directly between her and Marshall. His entire body shook with fear, but his voice came out clear and firm. She hasn't fallen. She's risen above whatever darkness you tried to drag her into. Marshall's laugh was hollow. How touching, "Step aside, Mr. Wilder. This doesn't concern you." "I'm not moving," Samuel insisted, though his knees felt like water. The gunshot cracked through the air like thunder, the bullet striking the wall inches from Samuel's head. A warning shot. Kim tried to pull Samuel back, but he stood his ground. "Final warning," Marshall growled. "Move, or the next one goes through your heart." Samuel's fingers moved across his phone screen, hidden behind his back. "You know what your problem is, Commander? You're so focused on the past, you forgot to study the present." With trembling fingers, he pressed the final command sequence. Above them, the emergency sprinkler system roared to life with a metallic groan. Water burst from dozens of nozzles, instantly drenching everything and everyone. Marshall instinctively raised his arm to shield his eyes from the sudden downpour. In that split second of distraction, Kim moved. She launched herself forward with every ounce of strength she had left, her training taking over as she executed a perfect takedown. Her shoulder hit Marshall's midsection, while her leg swept his feet out from under him. The commander's head cracked against the concrete floor. His weapon skittered away into the shadows as Kim locked him in a hold that left him gasping for air. The years of rage and fear fueled her grip as she applied pressure to exactly the right point to render him unconscious. "That's for everyone you betrayed," she whispered as his struggles weakened and finally stopped. In the distance, police sirens began to wail, growing louder with each passing second. Samuel's emergency alert had finally brought help, but Kim's strength was fading fast. As she tried to stand, her legs buckled beneath her. Samuel caught her before she could hit the floor, cradling her against his chest as he lowered them both carefully to the ground. The sprinklers continued to rain down around them as red and blue lights began to strobe through the windows. "Stay with me," he murmured, sheltering her from the water with his own body. "Help is coming. Just stay with me." Kim's eyes fluttered as she fought to remain conscious. "You shouldn't have risked yourself." "You've been protecting me all this time," Samuel replied softly. "Let me protect you now." The sound of boots thundered through the warehouse as police tactical teams breached multiple entrances. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness, voices shouted commands, and officers began securing the scene. But Samuel remained focused solely on Kim, keeping her safe in his arms as she finally allowed exhaustion to claim her. "Clear!" voices called out from different directions. "Suspects down in the north corridor." "We need medical here, now." The officers found them like that, Samuel kneeling on the wet floor, shielding Kim with his body, as water continued to rain down from above. His expensive suit was soaked through, his hair plastered to his forehead, but his grip remained gentle and protective as medical personnel rushed forward to help. "Sir, we need you to step back," one of the EMTs said firmly. Samuel reluctantly loosened his hold, allowing them to assess Kim's injuries. He watched as they checked her vital signs and began basic treatment, his heart pounding with worry even as relief flooded through him. They had made it. They were safe. Across the room, other officers were securing Marshall's unconscious form, snapping handcuffs around his wrists as they prepared to transport him. The nightmare that had haunted Kim for so many years was finally over, washed away like the streams of water that continued to flow across the warehouse floor. The first thing Kim noticed was the steady beeping of monitors. Her eyelids felt heavy as she fought to open them, the harsh fluorescent lights making her squint. As her vision cleared, she saw Samuel slumped in a chair beside her bed, his clothes wrinkled and his hair disheveled. Dark circles rimmed his eyes, but when he noticed her stirring, his whole face lit up with relief. "Hey there, soldier," he said softly, leaning forward. Kim tried to speak, but her throat felt like sandpaper. Samuel quickly grabbed a cup of water with a straw, helping her take small sips. "How long? she managed to rasp. "Almost 24 hours." Samuel replied, "The doctors wanted to keep you sedated while they treated your injuries." He hesitated, then added, "You had us worried for a while." Kim attempted to shift position and winced at the pain in her ribs. Her entire body felt like one giant bruise. As the fog in her mind began to clear, memories of the warehouse came rushing back: the fight, the water, Marshall's face. "Marshall?" she asked, tension creeping into her voice. Samuel's expression softened. "He's in custody. The police found enough evidence in that warehouse to put him away for a very long time." He reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "But there's more. They also found files, records that proved he had been falsifying reports and manipulating evidence for years. All those things he accused you of? The military is officially clearing your name." Kim felt her chest tighten, tears threatening to spill over. Years of carrying that weight, of looking over her shoulder, of wondering if anyone would ever believe the truth. And now it was finally over. "The investigators want to talk to you once you're feeling stronger," Samuel continued. "But they've already stated that you were a victim of his manipulation and abuse of power. Your service record is being restored, with honors." A single tear escaped, rolling down Kim's cheek. Samuel pretended not to notice, giving her a moment to process everything while he adjusted her blanket. Over the next few days, Kim's room became a revolving door of visitors. The police came to take her statement, treating her with a respect she hadn't experienced in years. Military investigators arrived with official documents, formally apologizing for the injustice she had endured. But through it all, Samuel remained a constant presence, working on his laptop in the corner or simply sitting quietly beside her. On the fourth day, as Kim was doing her prescribed physical therapy exercises, Samuel arrived looking particularly excited. "I have something to show you," he said, pulling out his tablet. He pulled up architectural renderings of a modern building surrounded by peaceful gardens. "I've been working on this since they admitted you." Kim looked at the images with curiosity. "What is it?" "The Kim Brooks Veteran Resource Center," Samuel announced proudly. "A comprehensive facility dedicated to helping veterans dealing with PTSD, homelessness, and reintegration challenges. It will offer housing assistance, mental health services, job training, and legal aid. Everything I wish you'd had access to when you needed it most." Kim stared at the screen, her vision blurring. "Samuel, you can't name it after me." "Actually, I can," he said with a gentle smile. "It's my money and you're my inspiration. You showed me what true strength looks like, not just in combat, but in surviving, in maintaining your humanity despite everything life threw at you. This center will help others find that same strength." The physical therapist tactfully excused herself, leaving them alone as Kim struggled to find words. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. Samuel took her hand. "You deserve this and so much more. Let your story help others, Kim. Let it be a light in the darkness for someone else who's lost their way." A week later, Kim was finally cleared for discharge. She expected Samuel to drive her back to the garage, but instead, he guided her through the main entrance of his mansion. They walked down a hallway she'd only patrolled before, stopping at a door she'd never entered. "Welcome home," Samuel said, opening the door to reveal a spacious guest suite. Kim stepped inside, overwhelmed by the elegant furnishings and soft natural light streaming through tall windows. A comfortable bed was made up with crisp linens, and fresh flowers sat on the bedside table. But what caught her eye was the small military shadow box mounted on the wall, containing her newly restored medals and honors. "The garage was temporary," Samuel explained. "This is permanent, if you want it to be. You're not just my security anymore, Kim. You're family." Kim stood in the middle of the room, taking it all in. From homeless veteran to accused traitor to finally finding a place where she truly belonged. The journey had been long and painful, but standing here now, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Peace. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "For everything." Samuel smiled warmly. "Welcome home, Kim. Welcome home." She moved to the window, looking out over the garden where they had trained together just days ago, though it felt like a lifetime had passed. The afternoon sun painted everything in soft gold, and for the first time in years, Kim didn't feel the need to scan for threats or plan escape routes. She was home. She was safe. She was free. The autumn sun painted golden highlights across the newly constructed Kim Brooks Veteran Resource Center. Its modern facade gleamed with promise, floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting the cloudless sky. A gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh paint and newly planted flowers, rustling the red, white, and blue bunting that decorated the entrance. Dozens of chairs had been arranged on the manicured lawn, now filled with veterans of all ages, community leaders, and local residents. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation as people settled into their seats, many wearing their service medals or military caps with pride. In the front row, Mrs. Hattie Greer sat with several board members, her eyes twinkling with approval. Kim stood slightly off to the side of the podium, her dress blues freshly pressed and medals properly aligned. Her hands trembled slightly as she surveyed the crowd, still adjusting to being in the spotlight rather than watching from the shadows. Samuel caught her eye from where he waited near the podium, giving her a reassuring smile that somehow made everything feel more manageable. The city mayor stepped forward to begin the ceremony, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. Today marks not just the opening of a new facility, but the beginning of a new chapter in how our community supports and honors our veterans. Kim listened as various speakers shared statistics about veteran homelessness and PTSD, each emphasizing the critical importance of comprehensive support services. She noticed several homeless veterans she recognized from her time on the streets, now cleaned up and seated proudly among the audience. Their presence made her heart swell with hope. Finally, Samuel approached the podium. The sun caught the silver at his temples as he adjusted the microphone, his usual shyness temporarily set aside for something more important than his comfort. "When I first met Kim Brooks," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves, "I was in danger, alone, and afraid. She came out of nowhere to save my life, asking nothing in return. What I didn't know then was that she would end up saving me in so many other ways." Kim felt heat rise to her cheeks as Samuel continued, his words painting a picture of their journey together. "Kim taught me about true courage, not just in moments of physical danger, but in facing each day when the world has turned its back on you. She showed me what resilience looks like, maintaining her humanity and her desire to help others despite everything she'd endured." Samuel's voice grew stronger as he spoke about the center's mission. "This facility will offer comprehensive support services, including transitional housing, mental health resources, job training, and legal aid. But more than that, it will offer something Kim had to find on her own, a place to belong, a community that understands, and people who believe in second chances." The crowd broke into appreciative applause. Kim noticed several veterans wiping away tears, nodding in recognition of truths they knew too well. "I'd like to ask Kim to join me for the ribbon cutting," Samuel said, extending his hand toward her. Kim walked forward, her polished boots clicking against the pavement. Standing beside Samuel, she felt a profound sense of unreality. How far she'd come from that alley where they'd first met, from the garage where she'd first allowed herself to trust again. The oversized scissors felt heavy in their hands as they positioned them against the red ribbon. Cameras flashed as they made the cut together, the ribbon floating to the ground as applause erupted from the crowd. While the attendees began to mingle and make their way toward the refreshment tables, Kim turned to Samuel. Her heart was so full it felt like it might burst. "You've never been with a woman like me," she said softly, echoing her words from that first night. "But maybe I'm the woman meant for you." Samuel's cheeks flushed pink, but instead of stumbling over his words as he once might have, he stepped closer. "You're the first person I've ever truly wanted beside me," he replied, his voice low and certain. "The only one I trust completely." Around them, veterans and their families began moving toward the center's entrance, eager to tour the facilities. Kim watched them with a sense of pride and purpose she'd thought lost forever. Young veterans with haunted eyes, older ones walking with canes or in wheelchairs, families supporting their loved ones, each one representing a story of service, sacrifice, and hope for healing. Samuel's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. Together they walked toward the entrance, passing beneath the center's sign where Kim's name stood out in dignified letters against the stone facade. The morning sun caught the metallic finish, making it shine like a beacon of hope. They paused in the doorway, watching as veterans filed past them into the building. Some nodded in recognition, others offered quiet thanks, but all carried themselves with renewed dignity. Kim squeezed Samuel's hand, feeling the solid strength of his presence beside her. In that moment, standing beneath the sign that bore her name, Kim finally understood what it meant to come full circle. From protecting Samuel that night in the alley to standing beside him now as an equal partner, she had found more than just safety. She had found purpose, belonging, and love. The autumn breeze carried the sound of laughter and conversation from inside the center, where veterans were already connecting with counselors and support staff. Kim and Samuel remained in the doorway, their joined hands a testament to the healing power of trust and second chances, watching as their shared vision of hope became reality. The late afternoon sun painted long shadows across the driveway as Kim and Samuel made their way home from the center's opening. Their fingers remained intertwined, a simple gesture that had become as natural as breathing. The mansion loomed before them, but it no longer felt like the lonely fortress it once was. Samuel unlocked the front door, holding it open for Kim. The warm air inside welcomed them, and the usual evening silence felt different now, peaceful rather than oppressive. Golden sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting a gentle glow across the polished floors. "What a day," Kim said softly, her voice carrying a note of wonder. She slipped off her dress shoes, remembering how strange it had felt to wear them instead of her usual boots for the ceremony. Samuel smiled, loosening his tie. "Would you like to sit outside for a while? The weather's perfect." Kim noticed there wasn't a trace of the old anxiety in his voice when he suggested the patio, the same patio he'd once avoided like a forbidden zone, too exposed and vulnerable to potential threats. Now he moved toward the French doors with easy confidence, a testament to how far they'd both come. The back patio welcomed them with its intimate arrangement of comfortable chairs and the decorative string lights Samuel had installed months ago, but never used. As he switched them on, hundreds of tiny bulbs flickered to life, creating a warm cocoon of light around them. They settled into the cushioned seats, shoulders touching. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, while a gentle breeze carried the sweet scent of blooming jasmine from the garden. Kim leaned back, her eyes fixed on the changing colors above them. "You know," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I never thought I'd have this." Her words trembled slightly. "A real home. Safety, peace." She paused, swallowing hard. It still feels strange sometimes, like I'm waiting for it all to disappear." Samuel turned to face her, his expression tender but serious. "This isn't temporary, Kim," he said firmly, reaching for her hand again. "The center, this home, the peace you're feeling, you've earned all of it. You deserve this life." His thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. "And you don't have to figure it out alone anymore." Kim's breath caught in her throat. For so many years, she'd lived in constant motion, always alert, always ready to run. The soldier in her had learned to trust no one, to need no one. But here, in this moment, she felt her walls continuing to crumble. The sky darkened gradually around them, stars beginning to peek through the deepening blue. The string lights cast a soft glow across their faces as Kim slowly leaned over, resting her head on Samuel's shoulder. He adjusted slightly, making space for her to settle more comfortably against him. Together they watched as more stars emerged, twinkling against the velvet darkness. Neither felt compelled to break the silence with words. The cricket song and distant rustle of leaves provided a perfect soundtrack to their shared peace. For Samuel, the weight of Kim's head on his shoulder felt right, like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place. The mansion no longer echoed with emptiness. His days no longer revolved around fear and isolation. With Kim beside him, he had found not just a protector, but a partner who understood him completely. Kim's breathing had grown steady and relaxed, her body fully at ease against his. The hardened warrior who had first saved his life in that dark alley was still there, but now she allowed herself moments of vulnerability, moments of pure contentment. The future stretched out before them like the star-filled sky, vast and full of possibility. As night settled fully around them, neither made a move to go inside. The string lights twinkled above them like earthbound stars, and for the first time in both their lives, tomorrow didn't loom as a threat to be survived. Instead, it beckoned as a gift to be embraced, full of promise and beauty, waiting to be discovered together. The next morning, sunlight crept through the elegant curtains of Kim's guest suite, painting golden patterns across her bed. She stretched, still marveling at the softness of the mattress and the peaceful quiet that filled the room. This space, originally meant to be temporary, had gradually transformed into her sanctuary, her first real bedroom in years. Across the hall, Samuel was already awake, the sound of cabinets opening and closing in the kitchen drawing Kim from her room. The hardwood floors felt warm beneath her feet as she made her way downstairs, following the inviting aroma of coffee and something sweet. In the kitchen, Samuel stood at the stove, carefully flipping pancakes. He looked up with a bright smile when Kim entered. "Good morning," he said, gesturing proudly to his culinary efforts. "I haven't cooked for anyone in, well, I can't remember how long." They settled at the small breakfast table, morning light streaming through the windows. Kim took a bite of the slightly misshapen but perfectly golden pancakes, watching as Samuel waited anxiously for her reaction. "These are actually really good," she said with a genuine smile. "The house feels different now, doesn't it?" Samuel observed, pouring more coffee into their mugs. "Calmer somehow." Kim nodded, realizing she hadn't automatically checked the corners or exits since entering the kitchen. "I'm not looking for threats anymore," she admitted softly. "It feels safe." "That's exactly what I hoped you'd feel here," Samuel said, his eyes warm with pride and affection. Later that morning, they drove to the resource center, arriving just as staff members were preparing to open the doors. The moment they walked in, Kim was greeted with respectful smiles and warm welcomes. These people didn't see her as someone to be wary of or pitied. They saw her as a leader, someone whose journey could light the way for others. A newly arrived veteran, looking lost and uncertain, caught Kim's attention. His stance and the way he carried himself reminded her of someone from her old unit. Without hesitation, she approached him, offering to show him around. Samuel watched from across the room as Kim guided the veteran through the facility, her voice gentle but confident as she explained the various services and support systems available. As afternoon approached, they stepped out of the center together. Samuel reached for Kim's hand, their fingers intertwining naturally now. They paused at the sidewalk, turning to look back at the building, its new sign gleaming in the sunlight, its doors open wide to welcome those seeking healing and hope. Standing there together, they saw more than just a building. They saw the foundation of their shared future, built on trust, understanding, and the courage to begin again. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe. And tomorrow, I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.